Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So I've seen a lot of people recently starting to get Kovaaks, whether they got it for Christmas as a gift, if they're switching to keyboard and mouse, or anything in between. Another thing I've noticed related to this is that most of the people that are buying Kovaaks are actually doing the wrong scenarios for Fortnite, and this also goes for some people that already have it. But as a whole, people are really struggling to find the correct scenarios to do for Fortnite, and as someone who has a lot of experience with Kovaaks and knows a solid amount about the mechanics of aiming, I decided it would be a good idea to do a full guide on the best scenarios on Kovaaks that you can do to improve your aim in Fortnite. I'll be splitting this video into 4 parts. These parts include click timing, which improves flick shots and shotgun aim, tracking, which improves your tracking with automatic weapons on moving targets like when you're using an AR or SMG, and finally, target switching, which is essentially switching from target to target. Along the way, I'll give you some extra tips and pointers to ensure you're not only doing the correct scenarios, but you're gaining the most out of them. Anyway, without further ado, let's get started with some click timing drills. So as you might know, click timing is super important in any FPS game, but it's even more important in Fortnite, as most engagements result in a close-range box fight, where shotguns are used. That's why having good, consistent shotgun aim and flick shots will benefit you a lot. The first click timing scenario I want to recommend is Bounce 180. This scenario is great because it has small targets which promotes precision, and they also move in a mostly predictable pattern which will improve your timing exponentially. This scenario works wonders, and I would definitely recommend including it in your routine whenever you're a brand new beginner or even an advanced aimer. Literally anybody can use this, and I recommend it to whoever's trying to improve their aim. Next up, we've got 2-tile Jumbo Frenzy. This scenario is great because you get to go from one target to another without having to decide between a ton of different targets to shoot. Your focus during this scenario should be to switch between the 2 targets as fast as possible while maintaining good accuracy, preferably near or above 90%, or higher if you're a bit more advanced. The third scenario is a pretty tough one. This one is called 1 wall, 5 targets, passu. In this scenario, there are 5 targets on a wall that all move in a largely unpredictable manner, influencing you to flick to the target quickly to avoid any misdirection. This scenario is super difficult to do well at. Even some of the best aimers get stumped by this one, but it really pays dividends in terms of your Fortnite aim, so don't hesitate to try it out. The fourth and final click timing scenario is 1 wall, 6 targets, small. This scenario is great for working on precision in your click timing aim. This is meant to be a bit of a slower paced scenario, and while doing it you should be mainly focusing on hitting each target regardless of speed. There's nothing wrong with doing this one slowly, but it's best to pick up the pace a bit after a while. There are a few more things to note regarding click timing. First, there's nothing wrong with starting slow on these scenarios and working your way up in speed. Getting used to the scenario at a slower pace is never a bad thing to do. Second, when you're doing click timing scenarios, focus on having smooth aim. Don't just flick straight to the target and go back. Do it quickly but in a fluid motion so it all flows nicely into each shot. This will increase your accuracy and allow you to stay at a higher speed when you're moving between targets. Third, apart from the scenario I mentioned, I recommend avoiding tile frenzy style scenarios for the most part. They're fine to do for fun, but if you're purely focused on improving, then don't rely on them too heavily because they don't really represent many in-game situations. Alright guys, so our next section is tracking. Tracking refers to any time you're keeping your cursor on a moving target. This typically refers to whenever you're using an AR or an SMG. Tracking aim is absolutely crucial, especially if you want to laser everyone in your sight like a controller player. To start off the tracking section, we'll be doing close, long strafes invincible. This scenario is absolutely amazing. It's basically a simulation of a close-range SMG tracking battle with infinite health on your opponent. The goal of this scenario is to track the target as consistently as possible and to react quickly whenever the target switches direction. Second, we've got thin aiming long. This scenario is mainly focused on your precision while tracking. The goal is to keep your crosshair on an extremely thin, fast-moving target as long as possible. This is a lot harder to do than it looks. As you can see, my gameplay on it isn't quite amazing, and it'll definitely take some getting used to. I recommend playing this scenario a solid amount as it'll take a lot more grind than most scenarios to actually get good at it. Third, we've got the scenario called Smoothness Training. Don't get it mixed up for Smoothness Trainer, as they're 2 very different things. This scenario is a bit longer than most and might take a few minutes to complete. Don't get scared by the 1,000-second timer, as this isn't the real amount. The scenario completion is based on how many targets you destroy. This scenario ends when you've completed 8 different targets, and it forces you to basically adjust to a bunch of different types of targets, from slow, large ones to super fast, small ones, and everything in between. This scenario can be very difficult, and it might take you a while at first, but as like most things, it's a grind and it'll take a lot of attempts before you really get good at it. Fourth, we've got vertical long strafes. This scenario is really difficult to do and it'll take a while to adjust to, but it's super beneficial, and it's one of the few vertical scenarios that are actually good for Fortnite. This scenario basically has one target going up and down, so you can easily practice your vertical sensitivity as well. Even if your horizontal and vertical sense are the same, it's still great since you don't really get much vertical practice unless you're in an endgame scenario in-game, which is where it's needed most. This scenario is super unique and very useful, and I highly recommend it to anybody who plays Kovaaks. The final tracking scenario is Cata IC long strafes. This scenario is super helpful for short to mid-range AR tracking. Fun fact, this scenario was actually created for a different game, but a bunch of Fortnite pros picked it up after realizing how good it was. Alongside this is one of the few scenarios that actually implement a sort of terrain, being the elevation and steps, to create a different sort of tracking experience. Target switching is the third major category of aiming, and it's easily one of the most overlooked. It's absolutely crucial to be able to switch between things quickly, like if you see an opponent out of the corner of your eye and you need to flick to them to get some shots off, you're looking for picks in a scrim game, or you're trying to laser multiple people, a ton of other situations as well. The first scenario in this category is pat target switch. This scenario includes a bunch of slowly moving targets. The goal is to switch between each target, track it for a second or so, all headshots, I might mention. And I really think this scenario is one of the easier ones to get good at, but it's hard to be extremely good at it, if that makes any sense. When you do this scenario, make sure you're always going for headshots, as hitting the target in the body will take much longer and waste more ammo. Also, keep in mind that you only have 15 bullets, and it's refreshed to 15 whenever you destroy any target. You can also do pat target switch v2, which is a much harder version of the pat target switch scenario. This one's super hard to do, especially with the 15 shots per clip, but it can really help your fast tracking and switching. Next up, we've got vertical switching. This scenario consists of multiple vertical moving targets, which you'll be switching between and tracking. It's pretty simple yet super effective to practice both your vertical tracking and your general target switching. These last scenarios are some of my personal favorite scenarios, the Tile, Frenzy, 180 Strafing scenarios. There are 4 of these, from 100 to 400% speed, obviously 100, 200, 300, and 400, and I recommend getting a good mix of all 4 scenarios. The percent basically refers to the speed at which the targets move. These are some of my favorite tracking and target switching scenarios, because the goal is to switch between the targets and track them just like any other target switching scenario, but they also include the 180-degree angle, which is basically a full room, and it makes it a lot more realistic and will give you a much more realistic experience than most other scenarios will, especially in terms of target switching. By using these scenarios I've mentioned, I can guarantee you'll see some changes in your aim within a short amount of time. You don't have to grind your aim like a psycho for multiple hours a day, but I recommend playing Kovaaks for at least 30 minutes or so whenever you play to not only warm up your aim, but to consistently improve during that time. The scenarios we've gone over are the absolute best for Fortnite, and I recommend using as many of them as possible so you can improve your aim as fast and efficiently as possible. Thank you all for watching this video, I really appreciate it. If you guys want to support my channel and see more Fortnite tutorials, tips and tricks, and more content, I'd appreciate it a ton if you could subscribe and drop a like on this video if it helped you out. Also, I'd like to quickly shout out my Twitch channel, which I'll link in the description. I'm going to start streaming live there pretty often from now on, and I'll be doing a ton of things on there like squads with viewers, zone wars with viewers, customs with viewers, a ton of other stuff with viewers. Alongside that, you can see me play the game live in real time and ask me any questions you have, whether they're about Kovaak, something related to Fortnite, or anything in between. Anyway, enough with the self-promotion. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Have a great day, evening, night, or whatever it is, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.